Alright, we're continuing that. Welcome back to part 2. And continuing off from part 1, I'm making a gem called quickbooks-ruby-base. It is an extension of common methods, common stuff that's needed when working with a QuickBooks Ruby gem. And I have that in my personal projects. I have this pattern developing of and I want to make it a gem so I can reuse it across projects. So I need to open up that file too, and I have it in one of my just little personal directories here. And here's the gem, or excuse me, the class that I want to make into a gem that runs off of the QuickBooks namespace off of the QuickBooks Ruby gem. So I got it open here. I'm going to start just taking these pieces off. So let's just start right with the initialize method, and I'm just going to just copy and paste let's just copy and paste the whole method here over into our base. Okay, let's save the file and take a look at it a little more closely. Okay, now this first argument here is going to be the account. Now, this is going to be an opinionated gem too. I am going to assume that other users have the same pattern I have, where you're going to need to pass an account as the first argument. And in the account has all the settings that you need for a QuickBooks connection. All the OAuth information, and it's going to be linked to a record. Whether you're using Rails or a Ruby project, I'm going to be assuming that, and if you don't, then this gem is not going to be appropriate for you. So it's okay to take an opinionated stance. I'm going to do that here. Now the error log, this is just specific to the project I was working on, so we don't need that. And then we have here a method here that's optional, and this is going to be the different service that you want. Like if you want to update a QuickBooks customer, you need to make a special service for that runs off of the OAuth connection. So let me go back and grab that method also. Copy that, bring it over. Okay, and I'm going to just change this name because this naming is not very good. I use this, a more descriptive name would be create service for. So I'm just going to go ahead, even before I go into the tests, I'm going to just start designing the code. So I'm not just going to, I don't do strict tests first development. I first want to kind of shape the code, see what I'm doing first, then I'll jump over and start testing the things that I've designed. And okay, so it's going to create service for. Now I'm getting, as I go into this method, this is calling other methods. So this is called QuickBooks service, and I'm going to go and copy that method also. Where is that? There it is, up there. QuickBooks service. So let's copy. I'm doing a lot of copying here. Let's give this Tmux pane some more love, some more size. As I'm in this development mode right now, I don't need that other. I'm not going to be running tests as frequent, so I'm going to resize that pane and give me some more room, and so you can see things better also. Okay, now I'm going to name this, the QuickBooks name comes from the version 2. It comes from another gem. You don't need to know these specifics, rather. So I'm going to name this instead just QuickBooks service. Actually, let's call that QuickBooks Ruby service because it's really related to that QuickBooks Ruby gem. And immediately I see another method I need to copy over. So I'm just going through these paces. I think you can see the similar thing to what you do. Here's the method here, generate QuickBooks namespace. I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to call it QuickBooks Ruby namespace. Let's get that right. Okay. The flavor has no meaning here because this gem only does QuickBooks Online. That flavor had to do with the previous version. Again, details don't really need to know. So let me just keep moving. I'm just taking things out that don't need to be, because it's automatically online. I don't need to have that online. Okay, we're going to keep this. The new namespace is just QuickBooks. There is no source. Again, everything's online. Okay, so I'm just shaping the code here. I'm not running any tests. I already know the changes that need to be implemented. So, because I started right down here, so this is QuickBooks Ruby service. Instead, and it looks like I got everything changed over. So tests are going to flush out whether this is going to work or not. Set this create service forward, and let's go here. Okay, we run into another issue. This method here off of service is accessing another method code called OAuth client, another method we don't have. So I got to go over and get it. It's right here. Let's stick these here. Okay, let me take a look at this. Now this is where things are going to get a little interesting because this OAuth, what it's doing is it's making an OAuth token, and there's a lot of information here that here is a global variable. So where the heck is that coming from? How is that going to be abstracted into a gem? Here we can see that we're hitting database settings. Okay, so how is that going to be abstracted into a gem? So I'm running into a pretty significant roadblock right away. These are specific to the project I was working on. Now, how do I abstract these out into generic settings that can be used across projects? All right, now I'm still in my design phase here. Let me save the file. I'm going to go to another project I have that has the QuickBooks, that uses QuickBooks Ruby. And let's see. Okay, it's not there. Let's see. www. Okay, this is minimal casts. And there's a configuration file that gets run. It's going to help me design what I'm trying to do here. And so here's where this global variable comes in. And when you're setting up the consumer key in OAuth, this is what you do. It's under a Rails project, under config initializers. And in your Ruby project, you're going to have something similar if it's not Rails. And what I probably want to do here is, it's okay to maybe use this as a default, but I want to build like a configuration thing that kind of works like this, where you kind of go into the gem and do like I did in that rspec command, and it'd be, you would just set up the configuration like token is equal to something like settings qb token. So you can define where, we're going to assume again that it's coming off of an account database object. Again, that's the assumption I'm going to make, and that I'm going to stick to that. And so somewhere off of a persistent object, you're going to have these connection tokens for QuickBooks. Okay, so let me just, actually I can just leave it like that. Let me go back to base RB here. But I also feel like I am getting too far in without testing. I'm getting too far into designing without testing first. So I'm going to peel back a little bit at this point and just get back to where we started. Create service for is not even required because by default it's nil. So let's just test some of these basics here, at least the first line of create service, which is QuickBooks Ruby service method, and this it calls QuickBooks Ruby namespace. So let me let's even up these tmux windows. Okay, and I'm going to run the specs. All right, first thing we do is we get a failure saying argument error, wrong number of arguments, and yeah, that's because we now have a argument here, yet we do not have that in the spec itself. Let me just torch that window. Let's not torch it. Let me just move it over so it's not. I want the spec next to my base file here, which is tab 1. I want my spec right here. Let's go to the spec, and we're going to need to pass in the account here. Now this can just be any kind of object, so let's just make that a test double. And okay, we got green. We're back to green now there in the other tmux pane. So let's go back to base in our first tab and take a look what to test next. Okay, we said we're going to test these guys here. Need to make this bigger. Okay, we're going to test generate QuickBooks Ruby namespace, or actually we're going to test this, which is going to test both of these. Okay, so let's do that. All right, I just jumped off camera here, and I've just made a decision. I'm gonna speed things up by doing things off camera, again, to speed things up. So let me just cut and paste some code here. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to test the QuickBooks Ruby namespace over here first. Okay, I'm going to test that method. Actually, it's called generate QuickBooks Ruby namespace. I'm going to get rid of this method here, and instead I'm just going to, because we're going to need it a lot, I'm going to we're just going to create it inside the let method there. And this is going to exercise that method the way I want it to. I want to be able to pass a token in here, but yet it generates a camel case. Access token right there. So let's just test this first method here, and I'm going to get an error, and that's because I misspelled account. Okay, let's rerun that test. Okay, I get another failure here. It says undefined method camel case for access token. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so when I brought this over, I'm using camel case, but camel case is not a Ruby method on string. It is from Rails and active support. Now that's okay because I'm extending QuickBooks Ruby, which requires active support. But what that means is I need to require QuickBooks Ruby when I'm doing development here. Not when I'm doing development, just in general, I need to have that library installed. So let me go back to the spec and see if that works things out there. Okay, it does. We go to green, so it does what I expect. Now, here also this method says it should generate the QuickBooks Ruby service namespace. This is actually just QuickBooks Ruby namespace given a string. So here it was a token. Here I'm going to be doing a string, and the string should bypass this camel case stuff. Should only happen if there's a symbol. So this gives you the flexibility of putting a string in and having it exactly do what you want. It's not doing any kind of conversion. So let's run that spec also. Okay, and that spec is also green. Alright, now I'm feeling a little bit better because I've got some tests running. So I didn't want to get too far into the design phase before I got some tests going. That's my normal workflow. But let's go back down to create service for, and we got this taken care of. So this is going to generate what we want. Now let's go back to this OAuth client where I had kind of stopped off, and I decided that I was going to go with kind of like a design solution like this, where these key things to make an OAuth access token, these key persistence items, were going to be done into a configure block. So let's do that configure block now. The configure block itself is a class method off of base, so that can be done in some different ways. One is you could just hang off some methods this way, like def configure. We're not going to do that. Let's keep things cleaner than that. So instead, let's make a file off of the base directory, because it's going to be inside of the base class. So we're going to make a module called configuration RB, and let's open it up. Again, for saving time, I'm going to cut and paste code the rest of the way out. And here we have I'm going to just have to do the formatting there. Push that in one. Oops, that's still not right. Okay, let's try that again. Alright, how many spaces? Okay, that looks good. Now, so module configuration, here's the configure method, and here are some of we're just going to yield to self there when we pass the block in, so that returns a self. And then here I just have created the OAuth consumer, which is that global variable here. QB OAuth consumer is, let's go back down to the OAuth client here. That OAuth consumer, you're going to be able to set that through this configuration. By default, it's going to be that variable, that global variable, and that's okay because most of the directions on the QuickBooks Ruby class have that. I'm sure most people are going to be using that, but you could set that manually also. And we got a getter and a setter here to do that, and the getter defaults to that variable. Here I decided to name, so instead of token, I'm going to call it persistent token. So that's what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. And to do that, I'm using an array and class eval, so I don't have to type these in. These could be typed manually too, but since there was 3 of them and there may be more, maybe in my design phase I'm thinking there could be more, let's just stick them in and reuse them. In class eval, just evals, so we send in the type, so it would be persistent token, persistent secret, persistent company ID, and we make getter and setters for those, just like we did up here. Okay, and this is a module. And to include that in, we're going to use the extend keyword. Let's go up here, and we're going to do extend. Now we can just use configuration because we're using the right, we're putting it in the right directory and using the right naming convention style. So this is going to be found, and we just need to do extend configuration. Let's give a space there. Save the file. Let me also save the configuration file down here, and let's just test if what I was talking about was right about automatically finding the configuration model. So I'm just going to quickly run a test to see if it passes, and there's an error there. We can't read it because let's even things out here, and let me go over there also and scroll up. And no, it does not find it. So I was wrong when I said that it's automatically going to find that configuration model. That's not true. This is not Rails. So Rails will do auto loading based on how you structure your files, but this is not Rails. So we have to require the configuration. Let's use require relative to, and since where are we? We're already in base. All we need to do is base configuration. Or excuse me, we're in QuickBooks directory. So we can do require relative off of that, which is base, and configuration RB. So let's run a test to see if we're green, to see if that, okay, we're back to green, so that means that it did find the configuration model here, our module, and the extend keyword in Ruby, that is for class methods. Include is for instance methods. Alright, that is another good place to stop. In the next part, I'll get into testing this configuration, and we'll continue to look at the OAuth client and test that method also. So stay tuned to that part, and thanks for watching this section.